Hello. Thank you very much for joining us for a special presentation from Patrick Walsh on the Essenes based on the Edgar Cayce readings. This is part two to a two-part series. And if you're interested, the link is in the description below. If you are also interested in some of the topics that he was talking about in the presentation, a link that you can access the slides that he used in his presentation will also be found in the description. And as a bonus, I'm going to send the ARE website information on there as well. If you have any questions or comments, you can also find my email address in the description. Now, we're going to send it back over to Tyler to introduce Mr. Patrick. Take it away, Tyler. Welcome, everybody, to another wonderful presentation of Edgar Cayce on the Essenes, featuring a presentation by Mr. Patrick Walsh. Mr. Walsh is a passionate student, teacher, and scholar of the readings and has a wealth of experience working with this in his daily life. And we are thrilled that he's able to share this beautiful presentation with us. So without any other delay, Mr. Patrick, thank you so much for your time and your participation
Oh,
today.
thank you. Thank you so much, Tyler. Let's see if we can get this rolling without more ado. Um, there it is. It seems good. All right, great. Um, okay. Now you may, let's see if I can get full screen. Let's see, slideshow. From the current slide. There we go. And then presenter view. Okay. Very good. Well, in theory, you should all be able to see a golden background slide with white and black letters. So let me recap. Could you click on the raise your hand? There's a little icon at the bottom, to raise your hand if you missed the first presentation or missed checking out the YouTube presentation. Is anyone here that, in terms of a need for recap? Okay, Antonia, anybody else? Okay, great. I was going to recap anyway, but just so I know that I'll, be aware of at least one of you there that did not catch the first part of this presentation. So let's review anyway, just to get us back. For some of you, it may have been, as you were saying, Tyler, at least a month since I did this presentation. So Essenes, a group that worked for centuries, we're told 400 years, to prepare the coming of the Messiah in the Holy Land. They were one of three major groups of religious Jews. But according to Cayce, we have a whole different perspective. Yes, they were well known historically as a traditional school of the prophets, as they were known by the Jewish authorities. But the teachings, according to Cayce, go back to Egypt. And at one point, Cayce, in a reading on the Law of One, said, and the teachings of Jesus were based on the Law of One. And we know the Law of One, according to Cayce, goes back to Egypt and Atlantis. So then you start seeing that idea of the soul groups that were together in Atlantis, and in particular, those who were called the children of the Law of One, in conflict with the sons of Belial, which there's a connection through other Cayce traditions that we're back again in terms of that conflict of those two groups of the sons of Belial and the children of the Law of One. But anyway, back to history. So according to Cayce, this group of souls keeps coming back together. They were together in Atlantis. They were, and of course, one of the pivotal individuals in that togetherness was Edgar Cayce. In Egypt, he was Rata, but there was another soul, Hermes, who we're told was a lifetime of Jesus who became the Christ. And then that same group of souls shows up in Persia, and there was the teachings of Zoroastrianism. And again, those two souls, Edgar and Jesus, then known as Zend, um, were together again with another group of souls that were in a very important supportive role. And then they show up in the Essene experience in the Holy Land or in Palestine, um, and were crucial in preparing the way for the coming of the Messiah within the community of Mount Carmel. It seemed to me, as I was doing this research, that by looking at this book called The Early Christian Epoch, which is one of the library series books, I discovered that over 500 individuals received life readings from Cayce, and they were identified either as an Essene, members close to the Holy Family, apostles, leaders in the early church, or Romans. In one case, Jesus' brother-in-law was a Roman and married his sister Ruth. And then, this journey of discovery, we discover that, wait a minute, 500 individuals? It looks like that same soul group showed up again, about 60 or 70 years ago to support the work of this little-known psychic living in a tiny little fishing village on the East Coast called Edgar Cayce. And so then I dug deeper, and sure enough, that was confirmed. And not only did they come together in a supportive role of this work that we understand as the legacy of Edgar Cayce and the ARE, but they played a crucial role in the establishment, growth, and development, not only of the ARE as we know it today, but of what we understand as study group work, and the Glad Helpers, the healing group, the 262 and the 281. And again, digging deeper into that research, sure enough, almost every member of the Glad Helpers group and of Study Group 1, that core group that supported spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and financially the work of Edgar Cayce, were all Essenes. And then there was that other interesting discovery that you may recall, according to Cayce, there were 11 maidens chosen to go through the purification and the preparation to be a channel for the birth of the master. And lo and behold, research shows that 10 of those 11 women who grew up with Mary and became part of her support group throughout her life all showed up and got readings from Edgar Cayce and played various roles in terms of the organization. And then that brought us to this reading that you see here, or this quote that we see here, that by the 1960s, still many of those individuals were alive and they were leaders within the organization. And I went through a whole list of people like Elsie Sechrist and Eula Allen and other individuals who were in a leadership position and who clearly had life readings putting them at that time in the Holy Land in the Middle East. So here was this statement. By the way, this line here, all but two of the members of the Study Group 1 and Glad Helpers were Essenes. And those two who were not identified as Essenes, that was Gladys Davis Turner and Gertrude Cayce. Ironic, two of the most important individuals in that group, but they were told that they did not incarnate at that time, but played much more of a overshadowing, almost guardian angel role for the two individuals with whom they were so close spiritually and had many lives together, namely Lucius, Edgar Cayce, and Andrew, Hugh Lynn Cayce. So there's still a connection there. They just didn't they just chose not to incarnate at that time. So here we have this statement that Eula Allen, prominent member in the 60s, lecturer, author, and a psychic in her own right, she said, we are the Essenes. We're doing those things we did back then. And I said, well, what did she mean by that? And then that's where we now join this discussion and the slides on the PowerPoint. So as my research took me along, I discovered that, let's see if I get this slide to move. There we go. There was a woman called Enid Smith, who was not a member of study group. She was an author, historian, and counseled and got readings from Cayce. She was told to write a book about that time and to draw parallels between the practices of the Essenes and what we're doing today. And in that reading, he he talks about the application of the experience in the entity's present activity, application as in prayer, meditation, and applying these principles, purification going on. That needs to be, as we have indicated, the analyzing of the needs for the entrance of a God in a materiality. Well, wait a minute, that's what the Essenes did, but it seems like he's also indicating to people like Enid Smith, oh, and you're back again to look at what are the needs for the entrance of a God in materiality, namely the return of the Messiah, perhaps in a different form, at a different time, in a different way. And then the next underline there, as you see in that first paragraph, and how same is applicable in the experience of individuals today. So all of that knowledge, we're back. He's essentially saying in all of those teachings, it's very much real and applicable to you here today. Now, he wanted her to write the book and call it The Dawn of a New Day. The message in the book, which is in keeping with the needs in the present as then. So he's just basically saying, you got to tell us what this work of the Essenes was all about, because we're back and we need to know what that work is about now. And he talks about, back then when you were Essenes, there was the looking forward to the coming of the Messiah and the preparation and the purification and the work that they were doing. And then in bold there, you'll notice in that third paragraph, and today there is the looking forward to the coming of the Prince of Peace, the new era. These are before you even as then. And these presentations, namely the book that she's going to be writing and perhaps lecturing on, would make same timely. So a clear indication here that these individuals were, many of these individuals were being given, in her case, a task about reminding us why we're back. So I continued to explore that theme in life readings that people were getting. And here we have an individual who was told that he was responsible for developing and participating in the form of practice and worship back in the day of the Essenes. And he elaborated on, he says, so the entity gained from teachings of many outside the pale of the tenets of the Mosaic law, those things that were good in the purifying of the body, not only through the mastering of activities in thought, but through the diet, through communion with the universal forces as manifested or expressed in nature itself. And this was this individual, 2441. Well, notice I highlighted those terms and those ideas in that paragraph, and notice the two columns. So there on the left-hand side are those, the teachings, working and purifying, mastering activity. And on the right-hand side, I really put it into more modern terms of what I see as clear practices, as I say there. Does this not sound a lot like study group activity? Studying metaphysical material outside of traditional religious teachings, diet, exercise, attitude, that we not only do we study Search for God material, but we also share our ideas and our application in the work that we do in terms of diet, exercise, attitude, of course, and then the mental disciplines, that we set these disciplines or opportunities or practices of things that we gain from our study and try and apply them in our lives. And then finally, communing with the universal forces. Well, of course, prayer, meditation, an integral part of study group work. So you can see where I'm going with this. That clearly my conclusion, and I've got one more slide that continues to basically repeat the same idea. This was Enid Smith. Again, remember the author. And we read this about analyzing the mind, the basis of each. And she says, you studied the Old Testament back then and used them as the basis of discussion. The various groups may be set in order, each rotating as a teacher, as an instructor for that particular meeting. And remember, all were secret meetings. Well, our meetings may not be secret, but they're not exactly public, and we don't necessarily broadcast them that with our neighbors and people we go to church with. Um, and again, there's the list of things that remind me certainly of study group work. The idea of some study groups even rotate the leader. That there's no one person that has the authority, and there's a parallel with the Gnostics in the early church where Elaine Pagels says basically the bishop was chosen by the Holy Spirit. And it was real clear to those praying and meditating who gathered in a home or in this meeting who the Holy Spirit had anointed. And it could be a man, a woman, a child, an older person. And so, again, that concept of rotating leadership that we often see in study groups. So, there we have it. My conclusion, as you can see, is okay, it's clear that those Essenes who came back, who are active in developing the study group material in those books, it was just soul memory. It was old hat to them. They knew what they were writing about and talking about. And many of them, had extraordinary experiences during their prayer and meditation. And in the 281 reads here, you hear about, well, having this experience and that experience. So they were old hats at this thing called prayer and meditation and raising of consciousness and creative forces. I will come back to this idea, but lo and behold, let me go back to study group. This is more specific to there are many people, who meditate and their meditation is based on the teachings of Cayce, and that part of the activity that is done during meditation is an activation of the spiritual centers or the endocrine glands. And as that energy is activated and moved, and there's the interaction, thus there is this raising of consciousness. And so this interaction and flow in meditation is very much a part, if you think about what Cayce said, from the readings that were given in 281 when they analyzed the seven churches and the parallels in Revelation of the seven churches and the seven glands. And interestingly enough, recently we came across a book called The Essene Tree of Life. Now we know that the Tree of Life and the Sephira is a strong part of the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalah, but this is a little different. And notice there are 7 branches above ground and 7 roots below ground. And it looks like in that image, there's somebody meditating at the base of the tree. And when I look at that, I kind of go, wasn't there someone meditating at the base of the Bodhi tree? You can see where my mind went when I saw that. And there is a suggestion, that much of the Buddhist and Hindu teachings can be gleaned from the Essene, the early Essene teachings. But here we've got a real connection, historic, academic, etc., of what the Essenes, how they believe. Not that Cayce's drawing parallels now, but guess what? This historic document that was translated in the last century, detailing a form of worship among the Essenes, is just one more confirmation of this parallel that I've been drawing, because meditation and the activation of the chakras and the raising of our consciousness is an integral part of what we do in study groups. And here, then a gentleman, Abbey, I've forgotten his full name, has done some research and does some presentations on the Essenes, and look at what he drew. Those 7 branches and those 7 roots are connected to the 7 chakras or spiritual centers. Now, there's an interesting other part of this is that the Essene tradition is to pray in the morning and the evening, or perhaps pray and meditate in morning and evening. And in the morning, you pray to the earthly mother. And not only do you pray to the earthly mother, but on each day you pray to the angel of earth, sun, water, air, joy, and life. And there's a connection with each of those angels, of those aspects of energy, with those spiritual centers. And at this point, we have to recall in Revelation, wasn't it that John wrote? And to the angel of Laodicea, write. So even in that esoteric quote unquote Christian or biblical tradition of the revelation, here is this connection with angels connected with our spiritual centers, according to Cayce and Revelation. And here in this Essene document, we discover that this was part of their worship. And then in the evening, before you go to sleep, you pray to the Heavenly Father and you pray to the angel of eternal life, wisdom, love, power, creative work, and the angel of peace. Again, connected with each of those seven centers. And the idea being each of those prayers is each day of the week, each of the 7 days of the week. So I don't want to get into too much detail, and I'll certainly have in the bibliography the book called The Essene Gospel of Peace that was translated, if there are those of you who wish to go into a little more depth. My main argument and premise here, and this just kind of strengthens my argument, is that this group of individuals who came together to support the work of Edgar Cayce were indeed Essenes who had come back to continue the same work. And again, if that is the case, they worked to prepare for decades for the coming of the Messiah. Would that not suggest if they've come together again with this spiritual teaching, because this work is part of the work for preparing the way? That I guess, if you will, is my main thesis and argument. Now, and as we think about it, I mean, where does this idea of community and spiritual community show up? Well, we've seen it in family camps and retreats all over the world, conferences, a sense of communities being built, and certainly at the ARE Congress when members come together, and most importantly, in study groups, prayer groups, as in the Glad Helpers, where what I call the real work is being done. So for me, the answer was simple. What's going on here? Well, they had come back to prepare the way. They'd come back as a group. They were given readings telling them how they'd been together in Egypt, Persia, and Palestine. And that time period, the Essenes worked constantly to ensure conditions were right. And yet again, the work that's being given and developed, and the platform, or in the case of Cayce, the work that's being done was to prepare the way again for the conditions being right for what we would call, I guess, from a Christian perspective, the second coming. Now, I just want to touch on, this issue of the second coming and dates, because there are many people that think they know. And in fact, Cayce, and I'll come back to this point, Cayce indicated, and also the RAM source that I've quoted on other times, very similar psychic source from which that seems to have the same message and similar language, and a similar source, said 1998 would be a very important time. And the suggestion is, as we talk about this first and second phase of the second coming that we'll get into, is that maybe not enough of us had done enough to prepare the way for that event to take place in 1998. And that would also suggest the case for 2012, because that date has come and gone. Now, Kirk Nelson, in his recent book, believes that it'll be in 2026 based on astrological conditions that would be the most conducive for that kind of an event. And I understand that John Van Auken has, through his research on the pyramids, Egypt pyramids, has said it's 2038. So we'll see if they were right or not. But the suggestion, as we're going to be addressing and looking at, is what this role of we individuals, members of study group, what our role is in preparing the way, and how that fits into a time dimension that really has nothing to do with this three-dimensional world we live in. There's one quote that I think I've got further on, in which they're asking, the members of the group are asking the source, well, when? and the answer came back, well, from our perspective, it's really very soon. But from your perspective, from your dimensionality, it could be a while. Suggesting that what we're doing in this dimension, in this world, may have a lot to do with when that event takes place. So here's where we get into this concept of the first of the two phases of the second coming. And this is really where my journey began. Um, I came across this psychic source that was these readings were given in the mid 70s to a group of ARE folks in Tucson, Arizona, and it seemed to them and to anyone who studies this material that the source, identified as the Paschal Lamb, was very close, and occasionally Archangel Michael would come through, very similar to the dynamics of what was going on with Cayce, especially in the 262, 281, and the 5749 readings, where there were specific requests about the life of Christ, about the second coming. So in this reading, given in 1976, they had been told, this group in Tucson, that they were Essenes. They were all Essenes, that they'd come back to work on preparing the way. Well, they said, well, what does that mean? And please describe in detail, therefore, if that's the case, the event of the second coming. And the answer came back, that which is the second coming is in two phases. First, that which is the resurrection of the bodies of each and every individual by the resurrecting of the mind, even as you pray, even as you meditate, even as you act. So the body, in turn, physical, mental, spiritual, is affected and is resurrected cell by cell, atom by atom. And so it is done whether you know it or not. Cell by cell, atom by atom, you rearrange your life by the deeds, the thoughts, the prayers, the meditation. This then is the first step. And you know, just to break that paragraph down, and just a reminder, Tyler, that I'll be sending the content of these slides for folks to study them in more detail. That paragraph, we could spend a long time discussing what's in that. The key there is that prayer and meditation and individual resurrection, as there is this raising of our own vibration and consciousness through this activity. And not just our prayer and meditation, but there it is, deeds, thoughts, you know, how we apply these principles in our lives. Okay, so then, he says, then part two, the second phase is when those who have accomplished and have made a platform here, and among the rest of the peoples, then will come that which is the second coming, or the presence of the Lamb again, even as he left, in body, in soul, and spirit. So that's why you know, and then so that's what sent me on my journey. I said, whoa, wait a minute, I've never heard this before. And I thought I knew the Cayce readings pretty well. So that's where my investigation, and I started digging and researching. And lo and behold, this is probably one of the crucial readings that says exactly the same thing. And this was given to the 262, the study group readings. Now, notice there in paragraph 6, what is meant by the day of the Lord is near at hand. Two readings earlier, those of you who are students of 262 readings, Michael the Archangel had come in, chastised them for not getting on with the work that they knew they had to be doing. And right at the end, he just drops this comment, for the day of the Lord is near at hand. So two readings later, one of the members of the group says, whoa, wait a minute. What did he mean by that? And so the answer, that as has been promised through the prophets and the sages of old, the time and half time has been and is being fulfilled in this day and generation, and that soon there will again appear in the earth that one through whom many will be called to meet those that are preparing the way for his day in the earth. The Lord then will come, even as ye have seen him go. And there's a couple of things there that I think are worth highlighting. When I read this the first time, I thought, well, maybe it's talking about Cayce himself. But I think my takeaway from this, it's the consciousness or the energy of John the Baptist. It seems to me that if John the Baptist, who was so close spiritually, and they've been together as Elijah and Elisha, and they were teacher and students. It seems to me that either the consciousness or the influence or perhaps an incarnation of John the Baptist could be instrumental in um, in meeting those that are preparing the way for his day in the earth, in terms of being one of those individuals that would be helping and working in this area, perhaps giving readings, psychic um, sources. Now, here's the one I love, because they all do this. All the research shows this. So you say, oh, yeah, yeah, it's coming. There it is. He's just told them. Soon it will. And then he will come. And question number 7, well, how soon? You got to love it. Being human, we're in this three-dimensional time-bound reality. Well, how soon? And he says, and this is where this reading parallels what we just read about building a platform. When those that are his have made the way clear, passable for him to come. A suggestion, and then there are other in that same reading. It's essentially, he just comes back to says, and that's why you're here. That's what you lot are doing. That's what the study group's all about. So get on with it. So this reading, and then this is just confirmation of that same message. This was the individual who was told he was a wise man, and in that same reading, he was saying, "For until there is again the seeking of such as ye not only proclaimed but manifested back then in that lifetime, he cannot come again." I mean, that seems pretty clear to me, that this individual is being told, you have an important role to play, and if you don't, you're not helping the cause, so to speak. And then in another reading, 26258, 993, Edith Edmonds, a powerful spiritual healer in that both study group and Glad Helpers, she said, "Please give me more light upon his kingdom and his coming." And this is a much edited version of almost a whole page. I mean, the dissertation that came out of Cayce upon that request. And these are the highlights if you look at the bold. The consciousness of the desire for the hastening of that day. So the desire is important. Yet the cry in the heart and the soul of those that seek his way is to hasten that day. And as ye would be the channel, speaking here to these individuals, and this individual in particular, to hasten that glorious day of the coming of the Lord. And then a quote from the Bible, then no. So again, these two individuals clearly being told, well, yes, and it's your desire and your application that will be instrumental in that event taking place. I'll come back to that book title that I just showed you. Now, the RAM source echoes that same concept. By our deeds, our thoughts, our prayers, and meditation, we raise our vibration to become aware of his, capital H, presence within each of us. And that's it, folks. It is so simple. It's not complicated. I mean, I got a lot of readings and amazing details and amazing story to tell you, but that's it right there. If you remember anything from this presentation, it's our deeds, our thoughts, our prayers, and meditation will raise our vibration to become more aware of his presence. Where? Not out there in the clouds, within each of us. And then this was that concept that again I came across when I was researching the RAM material. It's in which this group in Tucson, were said, well, what's the purpose of this group? He said, a preparation of the hearts and minds of people for the time of the second coming. And then, again, a few years later, this was now 79, one of the members of the group may have forgotten in 76, they already told this, but referring to the Christ, you said he would make himself known to the faithful of the land and to all the world in another time. So in other words, those individuals who are raising their consciousness, who are seeking and searching for the Christ within, are described as the faithful of the land. Would you please explain? This has already been covered before. There will come that time when he shall return in clouds of glory, seen by all mankind simultaneously around the earth, by those that have passed over, even by all the planes that surround the earth. I mean, don't worry if you die before it happens, you'll know. And this is, and then they're told, this is a group that's told. And as I read this, I kind of see it, at least personally, as a message to me. This is why you exist at this time, to prepare the way, to be the guide, that his footsteps shall be heard by all, that his light shall be seen by all, and that he will be sure upon the way, for he is coming. And that slide and the next slide, so where do we go from here? And that was essentially, that's the Essene part one, where I'm just saying, okay, well, this seems to be pretty clear to me. Study group work, prayer meditation, our deeds, our thoughts, our purification, raising our consciousness, that's our job. But where do we go from here? Well, if we are preparing the way, and at the end of this presentation about a year ago, Patty Finlayson, well-known astrologer in the ARE community, challenged me. She says, okay, Patrick, so answer that question. Where do we go from here? And I said, Patty, it's going to take me a few months, but I'll let you know when I've answered that question. And then that's where, let me stop the share here and go back to the other presentation. The scenes. Let's see. There it is. Okay. And so that's where this, let me get back to slideshow. From current slide. There we go. Okay. So this is, I think, slide 20, and the previous 20 slides in this presentation was essentially kind of what I covered with you just now. It's just kind of reviewing what we did and the importance of the Essenes, and then the connection with study group work, and then what our role is here. And so, and you may recall, I didn't mention it in my review, but the 5749 readings are an incredibly important series of readings. There were 16 in all. They were given over a period of 14 years, and they were specifically on Christ, the life of Jesus, the birth, the resurrection, Christ consciousness, the second coming. And this particular reading, you're going to see two or three quotes from this reading. There'd been a request for Cayce to give a reading on the second coming in preparation for a lecture that he was going to give on the topic a month later at Congress, at the ARE Members Congress. So this information is essentially, okay, here you go. Now, what's interesting about this reading, I like this. This is kind of more the kind of what do we call it? This is kind of the interesting biographical and human aspect and soul aspect of this group. So they knew he was going to give the reading, and guess what? A whole bunch of souls from the other side showed up for the reading. I mean, I just love this aspect. I mean, normally there was just the two or three people in the room and the person who got the reading, but when they knew he was going to give this reading on the second coming, you may recall he had a dream about going on a train with all of these famous evangelists and theologians. And they came to a point where he was told, oh, you got to get off here, Edgar. And he knew if he didn't get off the train, he might not come back. They were moving off into another dimension. But he was with all these guys, some of whom he had known in his younger years, these famous theologians. And so there's that's what paragraph 5 is referring to. Many of these have ministered, have preached concerning the second coming, and not a one but has at some time left the record of his contemplations and experiences in those matters. Whether I can't read that because it's, let me see if I can get rid of that. Yeah, there we go. The frames are covering up about where we were at. Whether made in the heart and mind of his hearers or in written word, yet here today, in what ye call time, ye find them gathering in a body to listen to that as may be given by one who is to be a forerunner of that influence in the earth known as the Christ consciousness, coming of that force or power into the earth that has been spoken of through the ages. Listen while he speaks. Now, the square brackets there of Edgar Cayce question mark would be Gladys Davis Turner or someone like that, thinking who is there's someone speaking. It's clear that some entity and you know, if it is Edgar speaking, then why are they then why is he referring to listen to this other person who's to be a forerunner? So it's the pronouns there are a little confusing. And having studied this, I'm wondering if it really is Edgar Cayce, because there, what it suggests when I've read it the first time, oh, it's suggesting that Edgar is to be the forerunner of that influence in the earth known as the Christ consciousness. But then in the other reading that we read, he refers to that soul who will come and meet those who are preparing the way. So maybe it's a future life of Edgar. I'm not, you know, it's not clear, but it at least listen while he speaks. You know, it's almost like, is that really Edgar? Or it's whatever soul entity being source is coming through Edgar. And they're being told there's an authority about to speak. And one of these 5749 readings, you know, John the Beloved identified himself and finishes the reading saying, even as I, John. So it could well be that a soul such as John the Beloved was speaking here. Oh, wait a minute. What have I done? Okay, I just lost my format. Let's see. Um, oops. Yes, now what am I? Okay, oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, it's okay. I was worried there. Um, so there we go again, 5749. So I was going through this picture and saying, whoa, here he is again. Then, as there's prepared the way by those that have made and do make the channels for the entering in, there may come into the earth those influences that will save, regenerate, resuscitate, hold, if you please, the earth in its continuing activity toward the proper understanding, proper relationships of that which is the making for the closer relationships to that which is in him alone. So this concept, what we're really looking at here is what did Cayce mean when he talked about preparing the way? And what did these sources and these entities and these beings and the RAM material seems to confirm the same thing. It's a closer relationship to that which is in him, capital H and on. Again, I think echoing that same concept, that simple concept, if you will, of raising our consciousness. In this reading, he talks about that first phase, and he is abroad today, and then again, the second paragraph, he may come in body to claim his own. Yea, in those that cry unto him from every corner, and he comes again in the hearts and souls and minds of those that seek to know his, capital H, ways. Again, I think it's almost repetitive, but just a different way of explaining the same concept. Now, this is really, we've already talked about these dates, so I'll just quickly go through these. And the answer, you know, really, I mean, that I've given you my opinion. I've had lots of discussions with Kirk Nelson, the astrologer, and in the sense that, yes, astrologically, that equinox of March of 2026, astrologically, the elements could be coming together that would suggest that event. But notice in the answer to that first question, he said he would come. What about his second coming? This is a different one now. This is 5749, but that same series. The time no one knows, even as he gave not even the Son himself, only the Father, not until his enemies and the earth are wholly in subject to his will, his powers. And the idea, that Cayce often said, the will overshadows or overrides any astrological influences. And it's our will and our desire that will could make it happen tomorrow if a sufficient number of individuals. It has nothing to do with astrology. We just know that at those times astrologically, that would obviously make it easier or conducive for such an event. And again, in 3011, no man knoweth save the Father, and in 5277, as indicated, be prepared each day to meet thy God. He will bless those, as is the promise, who love his coming, then whether it be in this experience or when ye have returned. Let thy prayer ever be, Lord, use me in thy way, thy will be done, not mine. And that reminds me of my study group get very tired of me reminding them that there really only is one chapter in all two books of Search of God, and that's the cooperation chapter, and it's the affirmation, not my will, but thine, O Lord. And all the other chapters, in my opinion, are just variations on that theme. So here we have a Ram with the same message. Again, they're asking, can you give us an idea as to when the group will have the vibrations ready for Jesus Christ to come again? Is there a schedule we should be following? And he says, no. The time is coming, but look not to the morrow, but today. That's an interesting, because Cayce indicated that as well in that reading. As for the schedule, God sets the schedule. And then the third bold there, the time as seen from here. This is the quote I mentioned, referenced earlier. The time as seen from here is short, but from your plane, from the anxiety, the searching, it's quite a time. I mean, what does that tell us? It's like, oh dear. Um, so, so remember, we have two concepts here. The RAM concept talks about building the platform, which is really a psychic, mental, emotional, I think, psychosphere. And Cayce talks about making the way passable, which is much more um, not just a construct, but making the way. I mean, we're an active process, but essentially the same. So remember the reading we read earlier, 5749-5, listen while he speaks. And this is the one I was talking about earlier, 5749, paragraph 3. I, John, would speak with thee concerning the Lord, the Master, as given. And then a few paragraphs later, he says, seek then each in your own way and manner to magnify that you as souls as being would make manifest of his love in the way he will show thee day by day. And then at the end of the reading there, he says, for he shall come, even as you have seen him go, etc., etc., etc. He says, even as he appeared to Philip, and that appeared to I, even John. So here we go. Here's an example of John the Beloved basically being the source, if you will, of this reading of 5749, which was specifically to do with preparing the way. This was an individual who got a reading about his role or what he should do. And the answer, the Messiah is being born in the entity. Next bold passage, he will grow in thee until thou art properly attuned. And then there will come the knock on the door, there will come the call in the night, and he will be there. Again, that reference to today, now. Don't worry about tomorrow. And then there shall be at his side the one he will know as the Messiah or the Christ incarnate. Then the entity will know that he will be found by the Master through his own search and knowledge. So the individual's you got some work to do, but fully expect that he will come into your consciousness, your life, your awareness. 262103. This was given just before Christmas, and it was a reading that was requested in terms of that whole idea of the birth of Christ. And then, of course, you can see where this would be going because Casey's really talking about that birth within our own consciousness. And look at paragraph 14. He may be born in thine own consciousness, thine own understanding. He comes unto his own. And who are his own? Those who desire his coming. Paragraph 20, a little further down in that same reading, raising of that consciousness of his presence in thine experience, by thy dealings with, by the conversation with, by the life with thy fellow man. So may ye hasten the day when he, Christ, may come into thine own heart, unto his own peoples, to reign, yes, in the hearts and lives. So again, both of these sources, they're repeating the same concept at different times to different groups. That importance of that raising of the consciousness within and our own individual responsibility to be working on that. I'm assuming, I don't have a number for this, but what major events have to come forth to prepare people for the coming of Jesus? I believe this is a RAM source because he's referring to the platform here. Well, it's inconceivable. They're wondering about because, they're kind of, well, if he came today, no one would recognize him. He says, well, yeah, there's not the basis or the platform for his coming. Those who live right, and by right we mean in the ways of the Lord, and here's an interesting concept, by the fasting of the ego, the centering of self, not by observing feast days, washing of hands, and fasting of days observed, but the fasting of the ego, the centering of self in God, and becoming servants of God by being thy brother's keeper. And so the indication really is this importance of the individual. 5749 4. The same reading again, the same 5749. In this body consciousness experience much that I, even John, experienced. She's asking for an explanation. Recall, I, even John, experienced when I looked behind me from the cave and saw that the without and the within are one. And really asking for an explanation of that passage in the Bible in this reading. And he says, when the desires of the heart make each atom of the physical body vibrate. Now, we've heard this before from both sources, that idea of at the atomic level, the consciousness of, the belief and the faith and the presence of the Christ life, the Christ consciousness. So again, almost becoming repetitive, but it's just an interesting, different way of looking and reminding us of what this means, what this raising of our consciousness means. We'll skip this one. We've already read it. This is the quote that we had earlier about the two phases. Now, interesting enough, I said I'd come back to this. About a year ago, someone brought this book to my attention. It's written by Paramahamsa Yogananda of the Spiritual Realization Fellowship. And look at the title, The Second Coming of Christ, The Resurrection of the Christ Within You, a revelatory commentary on the original teachings of Jesus. And it's a two-volume, 1,200-page book in which Yogananda goes through an in-depth analysis of Jesus' words and teachings and parallels it with the teachings of his masters and calls Jesus a great yogi. And we know, if we really haven't gone into that, but we mentioned it earlier, Jesus studied in India and studied Hinduism and Buddhism, and not only studied it, but then taught those principles of the law of one to those individuals, and it got him into some trouble as well from other sources. But here we have, so this concept is not just in Cayce, and this is kind of opening the door to another discussion that we're about to have in terms of the second coming. Again, here's that reference to at the atomic level. I believe this is from the Rand source, will, whether they're at the bottom, whether they know it or not. Again, that reference, whether you know it or not, praying and meditating, it will begin the arranging of themselves cellularly, atomically, spiritually, that all may be arranged to the proper and for the coming. Okay. And one of the neat things about those quotes, about that, whether we know it or not, is I've been meditating, gosh, 50 years, mostly based on the Cayce meditation. Um, Took a break from that and studied some in-depth meditation with some Buddhist teachers and lamas. But essentially, I haven't had any of those great quote unquote experiences, but that's reassuring. There may be something going on. I'm just not aware of it. And over the years, the study group people will come to study group and talk about visions and experiences and psychic awarenesses and all this. And I just kind of go, gosh, guys, I must be doing something wrong. I don't have any of those experiences. But anyway, Cayce did say not to let those experiences distract us from the main purpose of the work. But I do like that reassuring, whether you know it or not, Patrick, don't worry. You're doing okay. Now, I just referenced, Yogananda and the Hindu tradition talking about that coming of the Christ. Now, this concept of a return of a messianic being or energy or time is not just unique to Christianity and Buddhism and Judaism. In Christianity, we've got Christ, the Prince of Peace, the Son of God, identified in the second coming. Now, the Jewish religion is waiting for the Messiah, the anointed one, who will bring peace in God's kingdom on earth. In Islam, there's a significant figure in their teaching is Imam Mahdi, who will lead the faithful against the forces of evil and restore righteousness. Buddhism speaks of the coming of the Lord Maitreya, who will be a compassionate teacher and bring in an era of peace and wisdom. Do you see a common thread running through this? The peace worldwide. Hinduism anticipates the arrival of Kalki Avatar, who will vanquish darkness and usher in a new era of Dharma or righteousness. And many Native American cultures await the return, as promised, of that known as the healer or prophet who came and visited them and taught them many of his teachings and then left, but as he was leaving, promised that he would come back. And there's an expectation on the part of many Native American cultures that the healer or prophet will return. So it's not just Cayce, it's not just us in our own little corner of the universe that seem to be aware of this and are working, as I would maintain, to prepare the way. Um, and you may recall when we were talking about the Essenes, Judith and the wise men who came. Do you remember? The wise men came from all over. And there weren't just three wise men. There were multiple visits from wise men from Persia, from Egypt, Gobi, Chaldea, India, the Tao land. So it seems to me in terms of, and there we go into a whole other area, but it's the law of one. And that these individuals in all these cultures around the world were students of that same teaching that goes all the way back to Egypt and Atlantis. And there's one quote in Cayce reading who says, "Oh, well, the teachings of Jesus were the teachings of the law of one."
Mhm.
So you can see that when we're talking about all these different cultures that are expecting the coming of this, whatever they decide to call it through their cultural tradition, they're expecting a very similar event. At one point, the RAM group said, are there a lot of souls in the existing ARE study groups that were Essenes before the birth of Jesus that are back to help with this work? I'm going, boy, they just put it out there, didn't they? Well, there are some here. There are some among those which would be termed the Eastern beliefs or paths. We see several prominent Buddhists that are in this country as Essenes of quite influential beings at other times. So again, this confirmation that it's not just us in this little world of Cayce and the readings and the work that we're doing in our study groups. It really seems to suggest that this is a universal concept, and that there are many individuals in many different cultures believing in the return, and some of them, hopefully, are actively working towards that. And again, we come here to this spoiler alert, if you will. Prayer and meditation is the answer. Um, this group in Tucson, when they were being told about this work and what they're doing, etc., they were active in study groups in Tucson, and so I can see why they would ask this question: do we continue to work with Search for God groups as one of the bases for this preparation? Yes. For there shall be continuation, not only among these people, but other peoples, as the work, as the light, as the message grows bolder, grows stronger. It cannot be repressed, but to spread among that organization, as it did in days of old, from the Essenes to those others who believed, who became as the followers, as the disciples of those who were Christians first. See? So confirmation, again, just another independent, in this case, psychic source, confirming this premise that those involved in study group work are clearly back and working for that purpose. And for many of us, it seems old hat and familiar. Um, the RAM material was very similar to the Cayce readings for this group in Tucson, in the sense that they were given readings over a period of years for spiritual growth. Very similar to the way that the 262 study group readings were given for their own spiritual growth. But at some point, they were told that they were now going to give readings on the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Revelation, Genesis, and parts of Acts. And that these readings were given as a metaphysical interpretation of a deeper meaning of the Bible. Very similar to the way that Cayce gave the interpretation of Revelation in those 281 readings to the Glad Helpers, and connected as we know, the seven churches to the seven centers and meditation. So this theme, this quote actually refers again to prayer meditation, but it's the passage in the Bible about there shall arise false Christs and false prophets. And therefore know that until that time that he returns, ye will find him only within yourself, not through another, not through a mechanism, but through that which is prayer, meditation, the meeting in the closet, the temple of self. Again, echoing the same message: all others may point to or start you, but ye must find him yourself. Again, it just keeps coming back to individual responsibility, and sounds like we've got some work to do focusing on that prayer meditation. Again, that echo of the still small, again, that idea of the false Christ and the false prophets showing up in Mark 13. And again, the reply saying, the message here is trust in that which is the small voice within yourselves, that you may know the truth, the way, and the truth. For if you are prepared, if you have the faith, you will know the presence of the Christ. Whoa, seems pretty clear. This one, when we did the presentation with Patty Finlayson, she said, "Oh, this is so meaningful to me. This apparently is one of her favorite passages in the Bible. Blessed are those servants who the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you," etc. And the explanation of that passage: the servants here are your servants. These are the seven centers. These are that which is used by God as the path to feed you, to anoint you, to prepare you for the day of the Lord. Then work upon your centers, bless your centers, rejoice your centers. For as you pray and meditate and develop at all times, your centers are ever ready to help and to be there for you. And again, so we're getting into the nuts and bolts here of meditation. As we understand it, those who have studied meditation in terms of the Cayce tradition, here we are. This is what we're doing in meditation, activating those centers that they may be our service, that they may help us in this journey. And and again, the passage in Luke we're being told prayer and meditation is your key, but your actions are the candles that are lit. Watch yourselves, pray for guidance. Forget not the reason, the mission, for the mission is others first, always others first. Um, and again, that's the echo of not just prayer and meditation, but our thoughts and our deeds. In this case, are those candles that are referred to in that passage in Luke. Um, there was an interesting idea. There are the prayers then for peace and love, and the whole idea. There was a whole kind of this reading was about prayer, and the source was interrupted. And you said you say we were to pray for peace. This has always bothered me, sir, because of interfering with law, and he's interrupted. And some of us know who that person asking the question was because having a military background, he would refer to this source as sir. Anyway, comes the answer. The peace of God which passeth understanding. Forgive us for not making this clear. Not for peace as man to man, but peace within each man, that they may find their way and understand their Maker, even as peace was given through the Essenes so that he might come. So must a platform of peace within individuals and a group come into this world that he may come again. See? Does that "see" with a question mark look familiar? For those of you who are students of the readings. Um, and interestingly enough, right now, our study group are having a debate and a discussion about praying for peace. And we're trying to come up with a prayer for peace that we can all feel comfortable with. And I won't go into the details of the discussion, but we're also looking at this passage about peace within each of us. Um, this was a prayer that was given. What affirmation or prayer can be used to help this group and those outside this group to prepare for the second coming? And there were two prayers that were given. Oh God, fill my cup that it may run over, that my neighbors may be filled, so his may run over, and his neighbors, for all mankind, even as Christ Jesus. Prayer meditation concerning the second coming. I'm sorry, I don't think that was part of the prayer. And then, are these the exact words the source gave as an affirmation to be said concerning the second coming? And then they read the prayer from a previous reading and it was confirmed. Let the light of the Christ force show through this group that he is to come, will know the way is lit, and that his feet are sure upon the path, and he will come. And he said, yep, that was the prayer we gave you. So we are perhaps coming to a good point. Tyler, give me some direction here. We've been going about an hour and a bit, um, and we are at, I'm not sure what slide number we're at. We still got two more topics to cover. And what are your feelings in terms of time and material?
I thank you again so much for this presentation. It's so wonderful to hear. Uh, we typically our study group sessions will last about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Uh, so if you feel like there is a space coming up that you
Hmm.
can maybe conclude with a final thought, and then we can open it up for discussion
Right.
or questions. Maybe
Mhm.
leave about 10 minutes of that
Great.
available. And then
Great.
if you want to continue the rest of it, we can honor um, the people's time. So if they have to leave, they can, and if they want to stick around, they're welcome to.
Great.
And then we edit it all together and put it on the YouTube page once it gets done.
Great. Okay, let me go. So we'll proceed a little bit longer, and then, as you indicated, I'll look for a good stopping point. Um, so the second event, this section now, we're really getting into more detail and descriptions of this major event that will happen once we've made the way passable. As to his appearance, we are assured we shall see him as he is. He will walk among men. He will be in thy midst. Be thou then those that will make his path straight. For narrow is the way, yet straight is the gate that leads to that knowledge that may be had in him. 294, this was a reading given to Edgar himself. Um, in reading 36:15, again, this reassurance of his coming. For he will one day come again, and thou shalt see him as he is. To those who have been faithful, thou wilt be among those in the earth, about halfway through that paragraph, when he comes again. Glory in that. Let it be rather the one reason why ye keep the faith in the coming of the Lord, to call those who have been faithful. This is something to look forward to! Exclamation mark 36:15 is told. So there are some very specific Cayce references to this event. And again, many of you are familiar with the later chapters in Matthew that certainly speak to that, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory. But look at the answer from the source. That glory is the awakening within selves and the reaching to and the striving for the presence of him who is indeed the Prince of love and redemption. Therefore, if ye would be as that which is, as a block in that which is the temple of God, well, there's an interesting idea of the structure of the platform. Be ye then he who is aware and uses the opportunity and the abilities as best self can to open up that which is the spiritual center of self to the awakening. I understand that the return of the Christ to this planet meant the flowering of the Christ spirit within individuals rather than the Christ returning physically. Is this concept incorrect? Yes, it's incorrect. It is the flowering, yes, of course, which we've been talking about in this first phase, but it is that he will come. So often there's a discussion, well, is it going to be just within ourselves or is it going to be a major event? And it's not an either or, it's both. And they're integrally connected. And again, a very clear description here in one of the Ram readings. How will we know Christ when he returns, since the Bible tells us that even the faithful will be led astray by those who claim to be Christ? When he comes, all will know. For even as given, he will come in clouds of glory. All will feel, all will see. Even the doubters will know this. Indeed, he is the Christ. There will be nothing as like it that has happened to mankind since the day, or that which ye term as day, that the stars sang, and that there was creation, and that man began. So in all of history, going all the way back, and that all souls will be present at that event. Again, those chapters of Matthew 24:25, appear the sign of the man in heaven. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the man. It says, for the eyes even of those not enlightened will see the coming of the glory, who is, has been, and will be, who is the light of mercy and justice. He who is that which is grace, that may wash ye, that your sins may be not. And again, understandable question. Must we be physically present when this happens to partake of it? all souls would be present, whether they're of the lowest elements or the highest elements of the earth, near the earth, around the earth. For this is the event, this is the opening, this is that which is the gateway, the light, and oh, will the souls sing. And Patty Finlayson, the astrologer, when we read that, she said, oh my God, OMG, astrology as we know it is not going to work. We're talking about a universal event. We're not just talking about a planetary event, which is what the influence is, most astrology, solar astrology. She's saying this is bigger. This is a whole different kind of astrology that would be required to understand that event. And we've had this reading, this reassurance that he is coming. And I think this will be a good time to stop because this is a good point because this is a whole different now. We've seen there's the work of the individuals. There is this event that will happen once the way has been cleared, and then what? And this next section really is the then what once that event occurs. And interestingly enough, this whole question of the 144,000, which are two, both again, it's not either or. It's not just 144,000 souls, but it's symbolic of the centers, the nervous centers within our own being. And it has to do with the number of souls who will return to lead and teach. Interestingly enough, that number is clarified at a later reading, says, don't get caught up in the numbers, guys. So that is the 144,000. And there's some detail given about that 1,000-year period that's referred to both in the Bible and in Cayce and in this Ram source. And we can go into that in some detail at another time. As you can see, there's a considerable amount of information there. So we'll leave it at that. But clearly, the 1,000 years is a time of learning, of peace, of soul development, and as I understand it, then a transition to a resurrection in essence of those souls who are here both to learn and to teach. Good to go. So this issue of the 144,000. So this is 281.29. These would be the glad helpers. And talking about meditation and prayer and they're wanting clarification. Are we correct in interpreting the 144,000 who were sealed as being spiritualized cellular structure of the 12 major divisions of the body? Correct. And this is as of man and the name of saint. And then the next question a little further on is the multitude before the throne as described in chapter 7. So this must be Revelation, the rest of the cellular structure in process of spiritualization. This is correct. So again, there's that reference to that this transformation and change and resurrection is taking place within individuals at the cellular level. And again, let's see, that was 281.29. So they're really in the middle of this understanding of Revelation. And it says, what was meant in reading of October the 28th, which is probably the 281.29, in connection with the 144,000 who were sealed as being spiritualized cellular structure of the 12 major divisions of the body, when the reading gave correct, and this is as of man in the name of saint. Please explain. Justice has been illustrated or given as to the relative force of the vibratory forces of the individual, which is shown in an individual's soul or entity by its name and its activity in all the influences or environments through which it passes in that which is a shadow in man, active living, to those influences that are relative to the infinitive position of a soul's activity in the universe. It's like, wow. That is a huge mouthful, but it's essentially saying, yes, this vibratory pattern that's going on within each of us is both very real and also connected to the soul, that it's kind of that within and without, and it's It's way over my head, but it's the reason I've included it. My understanding is that it is this confirmation. This 144,000 is referring to the vibratory patterns within our own being. This would be the Ram interpretation of that same chapter in Revelation. I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed on 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. And the Ramsor said, strictly speaking, first, this is that which is the touching of the 144,000 cells of self, but also representing the 144,000 cellular bodies that become universe bodies that self eventually will be Lord and creative force over. Ooh. Okay, and I think remember the universal reference in the Cayce, that kind of helps me understand what Cayce was talking about. Same idea, same concept that this, yes, it's also within, but that each of those cells are in, this kind of huge kind of as above, so below, and within the grain of sand is the universe, and that whole kind of mystical understanding of multiple dimensions, which is way beyond, is above my pay grade. Meaning of spiritual centers and the hardening. This is what I've wondered about when I've come across this. The September 20th in question last year, reading 105, the answer you referred to the 140,000 in Revelation as making up the spiritual centers of self. Please define and elaborate on the meaning of spiritual center. The spiritual center of self, or the prime movers, course that which is the third eye area, but all that which is the endocrine system consists of main body cells, see to the number of 140,000, unvarying in all individuals. Interesting. Except those who have taken unto themselves the sign of the beast, see where there is a merging then in these entities to the singular cell system or bicell system of composite matter or the hardening of same, especially to that which is the pituitary, you see. Interesting. I mean, yes, there are the 144,7, but, the sign of the beast, those who are more concerned about self and ego, and perhaps even misusing of those centers, is essentially saying, some of those glands may just not function the way they were meant to. In reference again, the 144,000 shows up in Revelation 21:17, and he measured the wall thereof, 144 cubits. Okay, there's your 144. According to the measure of a man, that is of the angel. And the source says, you have the measure of a man being that which represents the 144,000 purified cells within your body, becoming that which becomes angelic or the messenger of God, to fulfill then the promise as given here in times past, that you may measure to the will of God. This is, I guess I full disclosure here. The RAM source, and you can see from this reading, is this group in Tucson, one of whom was a man called Frank Adams, who had been a student of Cayce all his life, and lived in Tucson and worked with this source and asked the question, because he could see the way this material was coming through, is this the continuation of the work of study group 1? And they were told, yes, it is. So one of the reasons why there's these amazing similarities between these two sources is that they're the one and the same. And our study group has done an in-depth parallel study between what we would do is we started working through Revelation. We really just did the 12 churches. We didn't go through the whole Revelation. And we did a parallel study of what Cayce said about that particular church and that particular gland. And then we parallel and put next to it what the Ram source said about that particular chapter in Revelation. And you can see that it's taking what Cayce gave us in terms of that 147, just going in much more depth and much expanding on that. And I would say content wise, probably 4 to 5 times more. If you go to the, all I can suggest at this point is, that's kind of my perspective on this. I encourage you to go to the website, study the Revelation material, do it in parallel with what Cayce said, and I think you'll come to the same conclusion. But it does require a little bit of time and study to do that. But clearly here, we're really getting into the meat of this 144,000. So 14:1, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. So, as given so oft, this is the number of cells within the endocrine system which raise you up. And they cleanse and carry the rest of the cells, molecules, atoms within you to that which is the degree of salvation. And it also represents the core of souls that will lead others as entities within this earth time to reconstruct that which is this world as a living place for mankind before that which is as the great day of judgment. Now, my reading of that is the source here is clearly referring to that 1,000 years. And the day of judgment, I think, refers to what will happen at the end of the 1,000 years. Question, could this be actually physically more in our understanding because of aspects of the soul? This is correct. So the 144,000 are also the madis or yogic nerves. One of the members of the group clearly was a student of Hindu tradition, so this is correct. And one of the members of that group who studied Hinduism, there are questions about these parallels with Hindu traditions throughout this material because of that individual. So clearly that whole section was saying, well, yes, it's 144,000, but more importantly, it's what's going on within you. And that teaching and that learning and that, so it's getting into much more detail here of an esoteric nature of what that raising of consciousness and what of being at one and that resurrection of the individual is about. And it's clearly the 144,000 and understanding of it is a key to at least an intellectual understanding of what that raising of consciousness is. Remember, we're back to 5749, that famous 5749-5. These be hard to be understood by those in the flesh, where prejudice, avarice, vice of all natures. I think the question was, how do we prepare? Well, it's really hard for most of us to understand what this is all about. Vice of all natures holds sway in the flesh, yet those that call on him will not go empty-handed. Even as thou in thine ignorance and thine zealousness that has at times eaten thee up, yet here ye may hear the golden scepter ring in the hearts of those that seek his face. Ye too may minister in those days when he will come in the flesh and the earth to call his own by name. Again, clearly, back in the 30s there in that 5749 reading, he's referring to those who will come in to minister and teach and help after the second coming. It seems to me, the conclusion I draw from that is that he's talking about the cleansing, the purification, and what we're going to have to go through, either as teachers or as students, during that period. So there's still a lot more work to be done, it would appear. Okay, what have I got here in my notes? Here's the confirmation of the 144,000 is those coming in who have overcome, and the number that makes up the spiritual centers. So it's both. Okay, so RAM reading 1019. And by the way, on the website, there's a whole section on RAM on Cayce. Remember, the members of that study group in Tucson have been studying the Cayce readings in some cases for decades, and they knew them inside out. So there were a lot of questions in these readings where they wanted clarification on what Cayce had to say. So when referring to the return of Jesus the Christ in Edgar Cayce reading 365-8, the source said in answer 1, as given for 1,000 years, he will walk and talk with men of every clime, then in groups, in masses, and then they shall reign of the first resurrection for 1,000 years, for this will be when the changes materially come. Would you give more on this, especially the reference to those of the first resurrection? So these folks were asking the Ram source to clarify a Cayce reading on this whole concept. Those who resurrect within the mind that are alive, that are the first resurrection. And those who resurrect again are those who come in, who have earned, who will resurrect, even as he has given them life to do and to be, as they have met and made the selection and overcome. And is the 144,000 in Revelation pertinent to this? Not to the number of individuals, but that which is as makes up the spiritual centers of self. So again, the sources kind of seems to be indicating don't worry about the number in the souls. Just worry about what's going on within self. But that paragraph that we just read, I think, is an indication of who the teachers will be. Those who have overcome and made the selection and chosen to come back and help. Again, a reference to the 144,000 and those coming in. This was how will souls come in during the 1,000 years? Only as the bidding of that which is the mind and soul of soul power of the 144,000 as taught and directed by Jesus the Christ. It will be as selection of the 144,000. Okay, that's pretty clear. We are told that 144,000 entities will remain on this earth to assist Jesus after the second coming. Are these to be individual entities which are undivided, or are they aspects, or both? Please clarify. And I'm going, uh-oh, this is a rabbit hole, guys. But that's okay. The source answers. Oh my, this seems to throw people over and over and over. You got to laugh at this. They're just humans. Come on. They will be the individual entities, but remember, they magnify themselves as necessary with that which is enlightenment into the necessary amounts of aspects, which includes so many, many, many others. So in other words, that manifestation isn't just one soul. That soul has the ability to manifest multiple aspects of the soul to show up in multiple ways. So don't get caught up in the number and then the answer. So it isn't 144,000 then? I love this answer. Well, 144,000 times whatever. It's like, don't get hung up on the number, guys. It's beautiful. But essentially you can see, I mean, it's not an either or, it's both, it's all part of one, and that kind of, that individual, universe seen in the grain of a sand. Okay, and then here's the have we already covered this? This is the 281.37. What is the meaning of the 1,000 years that Satan is bound? These are the Glad Helpers group, and I'm sure this is in the middle of their study of Revelation, because we've already heard about the 1,000 years and explanation of what that passage in Revelation was. What is the meaning of 1,000 years that Satan is bound, is banished? That as there are the activities of the 40 and 4,000, in the same manner that the prayer of 10 just should save a city, the deeds, the prayers of the faithful will allow that period when the incarnation of those only that are in the Lord shall rule the earth, and the period is as 1,000 years. And my reading of that, interpretation of that is, that's that only certain souls would be allowed into this dimensionality. And thus Satan is bound. Thus is Satan banished from the earth. The desire to do evil is only of him. And when there are, as the symbols, those only whose desire and purpose of their heart is to glorify the Father, these will be those periods when this shall come to pass. Be ye all determined within thy minds, thy hearts, thy purposes to be of that number. When the saints, it's it's kind of at one level don't get caught up, but I think the definition of Satan from the Ram source is it's ego, it's selfishness, but mostly mind and ego, and that we're going to be above that level of awareness and consciousness, and we're going to be functioning at a much higher level. And so the Satan being bound is that those negative aspects, even of ourselves, are just going to are not going to be allowed to, because we'll have the ability to heal and as Marilyn was saying earlier, to deal with all those things that maybe during that period we're still dealing with, and we're going to be helped to heal and cleanse and purify if we haven't done it already. Um, Okay, so my summary of this passage, here's a reminder and an admonition of one, the importance of making the way passable, that he will walk with men of every clime, and that he will rule for the 1,000 years in this reading of 364-7. Art thou ready to give account of that thou hast done with thine opportunity in the earth as the sons of God, as the heirs and joint heirs of glory with the Son? Then make thine paths straight, for there must come an answer that thou hast done with, there must come an answer for that thou hast done with thine Lord. And the bold there in the parens, a suggestion that there will be an accounting of those who have prepared the way. That's my comment there. He will not tarry, for having overcome, he shall appear even as the Lord and Master, not as one born, but as one that returneth to his own, for he will walk and talk with men of every clime, and those that are faithful and just in their reckoning shall be caught up with him to rule and do judgment for 1,000 years. Again, this allusion to those he has chosen to come in and teach and help and continue the work. 10 days later, they asked for a clarification. Please explain what you meant. This is the Cayce group. He will walk and talk with men of every clime. Does this mean he will appear to many at once or appear to various peoples during a long period, as given for 1,000 years? He will walk and talk with men of every clime. Then in groups, in masses, then they shall reign of the first resurrection for 1,000 years, for this will be when the changes materially come. And again, you're wondering what that change materially means, perhaps in terms of some people refer to living more in perhaps a fourth dimension and non-physical awarenesses. And again, my conclusion here is in those first three verses of Revelation 20. Essentially, the message is there. I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, etc., etc. That passage in Revelation, and the reference to the 1,000 years should be filled, and after that he must be loosed a little season, in the sense that then that will be a whole new cycle starting, as we'll get to that quote in a minute. You have that which here gives you an outline of what happens, not only to the world in general, but the individual mind and soul force at that time. For at that time, you see, when you and all meet that which is the angel which binds Satan, or the selfishness, or that which is the misused mind and intellect, God will act for that which is his day, or that which you would see as 1,000 years, suggesting one day of God is 1,000 years for us. For it will take you individuals 1,000 years to thoroughly cleanse yourselves, to reteach the structure of yourself, that which is the law of God, that which is the love of God. For it will be up to you then to mend, repair, and relive that which is the positive nature, or that which is the goodness of God, which has been given you from that time of creation and forward. So again, I think this again elaborating on that healing and that teaching and that growth and mending, repairing. It's something to that Marilyn was alluding to earlier. Okay, that was the first three, and then 4, 5. So it really seems as if Revelation 20, 1 through 5, it contains, the whole enchilada, so to speak. Again, referring to the 1,000 years in verses 4 and 5. Those that have sacrificed the intellect and the intellect controlled mind and replaced it with the intellect and mind of Christ are those that are not signed by the beast, for they have not misused the power, the gift of God. They will be those that teach and lead and do the deeds in this place. Make this the goal of selves. If one would have a goal, it is a position of great responsibility, for each that will be the teacher will be the million souls that need the teacher. I mean, incredible concepts here. It's just what? Therefore, set before you this day whom you will serve, God or selves. And those of you, who are familiar with the current talk and discussion of the law of one, we really got two camps: service to self and service to others. And so it seems to me that those that are going to be around during that 1,000 years, I mean, a lot of different people have talked about this in terms of the law of one, the teachings of the law of one, are those who, as it says there, for they have not misused the power, the gift of God, which goes all the way back to Egypt. And my understanding of the Ra source said, well, we came back to try and put right what mistake we made back then, because we gave you all this knowledge and all this stuff back then at the time of Egypt, and it was misused. And so now we need to put it right. And I won't let myself get started on what I see going on in terms of the selfish use of metaphysical and spiritual teachings, rather than using those spiritual teachings for an individual internal progression of service to God, and that becomes more important than anything else. But that's another story. That's for another day. Thank you, Patrick, for not going down that road. Okay. Those who have found the light will go on, and the earth will be returned. Oh, this is our final one. So this is my choices slide. Will he reign only for 1,000 years or forever? And if not forever, why? And where will he leave after that? Let the entity know that this state is but a beginning of the end. It is but the apex of the climb upward. For the spirit will reign forever. But the kingdom here on earth, for certain purposes, will be gone on to other things, and they that have found the way, the means, and the light, that have been reborn to the 1,000 years, will go on. And then the earth will be returned to those who must learn over and over, for they then will have missed another chance at that which others will have found. It's kind of no real condemnation, or as I, like to say, choices. Do not believe that Jesus or Christ Jesus is chained to this earth, for his mission will have been completed as the messianic law is invoked, or the Messiah of this time, place, and period will have done its job and brought forth those who are ready to go beyond. So, um, it it blows me away every time I just read this material, and I'm privileged to be able to share this with you, and just, gosh, it's kind of knock your socks off for me, but it seems to make, in my mind, perfect sense, in terms of why we're here now, and what many of us have chosen. And, that's cute that that idea, when the Saints go marching in, I want to be in that number. As Cayce said to one individual, I just love that reading. Just make sure you're among that number. Anyway, that's it, folks. That's the Essenes part 2.2 or whatever it is. Thank you. Thank you.
You, Patrick. Delightful and super encouraging as well. I feel
Well,
like the condensed material of just encouragement is helpful for that spiritual growth and determination um, that we are among the counted. And when we do become promoted to glory, as they say, that we are uh, received with a well done, good and faithful servant.
yeah, yeah. And I think last time would, the greeting of the Essenes, either to say
Blessed
hello or to say goodbye. Peace be with you.
peace be with you.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think the book about the Essenes that Tree of Life signifies, it's the Essene gospel of peace,
that's
and that
beautiful.
that inner peace that we're all hoping to find, and share. And
Any questions for Mr. Patrick? Right. Well, I think you left us speechless, to be honest with you.
really,
It was so in depth and wonderful. We got several accolades, Denise and Miss Brenda and Carrie. Denise, thank you, Patrick and Tyler, for your work and presentation. Thank you for this presentation from
well,
Carrie.
and Tyler, thank you so much, because you're really the guy that's making this happen. And I just tell my story of this journey I've been on, but you're the guy that's making it happen, and I really need to thank you. It's one last thought that I was trying to figure out how to include it, um, and it's the question of when. And I think the answer to the when is when enough of us. And what is enough of it? What does enough of us mean? And I stumbled across a Greg Braden presentation on YouTube, that had to do with, he was reporting on some research that was done, where they had people in a community praying and meditating and doing some kind of heart type of love prayer energy in that community. And while they were doing it, during the period that they were doing it, crime and all kinds of things in that measurable things stopped. And then when the group stopped their work, it started up again. And apparently the researchers came up with a number. In other words, how many individuals of this group of meditators, prayers, people shifting the energetic field, so to speak, so that there was more love and, well, less crime. I'm not sure about more love, but less, certainly measurable, less crime. And he said they came up with a number. And the number is the square root of of one. And one would be, basically what it came down to was my leap of figuring that was okay. So right now, and at the time there were 6 million people, and he was saying, what would that mean in terms of the population? He was talking about 7 or 9,000, and if we're 8 billion people on this earth, that it seems to me that the number is somewhere around 10 or 11,000. So, at least that's the conclusion I drew from those numbers, is that the square root of one. No, oh, I see. It's 1%. So we take 1% of 8 billion human beings, and that would be 800, 80 million. And then we take the square root of 80 million. And that, I believe, the number is around 10,000. I haven't done the math. But so the question is, when we talk about all those other groups all over the world who are expecting and working on and praying for and meditating on that concept, it seems as if the number is really very doable. We're talking about 10,000 individuals, seems to be, if indeed Greg Braden's report on that research has a parallel reasoning. But anyway, so I just thought I'd throw that one out.
So don't forget to
I feel like we can achieve that at some point in time. But we just need to all get there. And
Yeah, and it just comes back to I just got to do my thing here.
yeah,
And
and
then
I think we
hopefully,
all,
hopefully on that ripple effect, I think that Marilyn and others have talked about, then hopefully as we start resonating and that there's a synergistic effect that perhaps as we get closer to that time, it'll get quicker and easier and there'll be a sense of acceleration towards that event. But
I will say the prayer that you shared with us today, um, that came from the Ram readings. Oh
yes,
God, uh, fill my cup so that it may run over, that my neighbor may be filled, that so his may run over, and his neighbors, for all mankind, even as Christ Jesus. And I'm like, oh man, that's
yeah.
such a beautiful and simple prayer.
Fred's got his hand up.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Okay, as to when I feel like as to when involves when we choose the first cause to be one will with God, to be at will with God. And that if we can just do this in terms of numbers, it would be, 10,000 could easily do that. My activity at this moment would be to spiritualize my desires, that they be at one with God. So I'm planning on coming back. I'm 90 now, and I plan on coming back in the next lifetime. Of course, I'm not leaving this lifetime for another 30 years, so we'll move on. But I do feel like we can do it, Patrick. I know we can do it. I expect and I'm hopeful that we will do it.
Amen, brother.
Wonderful. It was wonderful presentation as usual.
Thank you.
And I'm going to listen to it on YouTube again when it gets up. And of course, the first one, I'll go back and start that one as well.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
My pleasure.